On a night where we have seen 2 new world champions crowned, and more importantly, we have feelings. Welcome to a Notsam Wrestling emergency podcast, because SummerSlam Night 1 is in the books, and CM Punk won the World Heavyweight title. Then Seth ROllins cashed in on him. Here we are. We knew this was a possibility. We knew this was one of the scenarios that people had shaped for this match in particular. But the way that it was all unleashed upon us was, I think, masterful. So firstly, the steps to take to get to where we got were CM Punk coming out and having this match with Gunther. And the match with Gunther was one for the ages. The match with Gunther is right up there with Punk's match with Drew McIntyre in the Hell in a Cell, when you're listing the best matches that Punk has had since he returned to the WWE. I mean, and this Gunther match was just a straight up old school classic wrestling match. It was perfect for SummerSlam. It was perfect for putting it in that type of match that Bret Hart made famous at SummerSlam, going through all the SummerSlams and all the great matches that Bret had. I feel like this was in that spirit. CM Punk worked Gunther's style. And there's so many little things about the match that I loved from little things. Like, there was this way I noticed a couple times of Gunther, like, doing a reversal against a whip against the ropes, and Punk wasn't, it almost looked like it didn't look cooperative. It looked like he was going to rip Punk's arm out of the socket, throwing him against the rope. And I mean, they go back and forth the whole match. Gunther was kind of the doling out the offense for what seemed like about 70% of it, maybe, and that's probably appropriate for somebody like Gunther. And, and there are some near finishes, and they're outside the ring. At one point, you see that the chops have gone back and forth so much that Gunther has blood on his chest. He's bleeding from the chest. Punk is worse for wears, but you're sitting there and you're going, the thing about CM Punk is this is a guy who people have accused of, either being in bad shape or being injury prone or being not cooperative in the locker room, or being all of these things that people and fans who have never been in a locker room have said against this guy as detractors. All of it is being proven wrong. And tonight's match was an example of how wrong all that stuff can be. So they're going back and forth, and Gunther ends up on the table. He's gloating. He's standing on top of the commentary table, the Spanish announce table, gloating to the crowd, and Punk pulls him down, and when Gunther appears from below the table, he's got blood streaming down his face. He gets in there, and he's still fighting, and at one point, Punk puts him up in the go-to-sleep, but misses, and Gunther has him wrapped in that sleeper hold. And I said that was my finish. It's something that I repeated when I was doing my Notsam Wrestling live show in the parking lot at MetLife, that my idea for the finish of this match was simply Gunther puts CM Punk in a sleeper, and the air gets completely sucked out of MetLife Stadium. And that sleeper was hooked in, and until somebody's out of that sleeper, you don't know if it's going to be effective or not, because multiple times now, people have been in that sleeper and they fight out, and it looks like they're going to power out, and then at the last minute, they don't power out, and they go out. Look at the way the Goldberg match finished. He started powering out of the sleeper, and then it wasn't enough, and he goes down. That's what I kind of thought might happen here, except Punk was able to get out of the sleeper, finally puts Gunther down. 1, 2, 3, CM Punk wins the World Heavyweight Championship. And I think there was this feeling in MetLife that everybody wanted to see Punk win. He's a good guy, but they didn't know if tonight was going to be the night. And the opinion that I heard over and over again was, he's got to be the champion. he's got to win the World Heavyweight title at some point. Whether he wins it tonight and maybe Gunther has done enough to make us feel like he might not be able to beat Gunther. But at some point, he's got to be the World Heavyweight Champion. We all want to see CM Punk on this return road as World Heavyweight Champion. And then we see it. And it happens in MetLife. And the crowd is going nuts. Because I think there were people in the crowd that didn't even realize how much they wanted to see this. And also because the match was so good and the story that we all went on through this match to finally get to the end. And CM Punk is our world champion. CM Punk, the guy that wasn't supposed to be back in this company at all, is now in the main event in MetLife Stadium, the same stadium where he didn't get the main event at WrestleMania 29 and instead had the Undertaker match. Now, not only has he had his WrestleMania main event, and we all saw how emotional he got about that on WWE Unreal, but now he's also got the World Heavyweight Championship, and there are tears coming down his face. And I mean, one of the things that made this whole thing so strong was the amount of time that they gave it to sit. He sat in it. We saw Gunther sitting on the outside of the ring, he couldn't believe that he had lost. We see CM Punk, and he's kneeling on the ground with this World Heavyweight title. He's taking his time to kind of feel like at home with this World Heavyweight title, to let the reality sink in that in front of 50,000 plus people, he's the World Heavyweight Champion. And then he slowly stands up and he shows that title to the crowd, and he's experiencing this moment with everybody. And then Seth Rollins' music hits. And here comes Paul Heyman, who has been carrying that Seth Rollins Money in the Bank briefcase the entire time Seth Rollins has been gone. But the threat of that cash-in happening has been literally non-existent. And we haven't even really known why he's been holding that briefcase. But he's been holding that briefcase even while he's been saying Braun Breaker is the leader, even while he's been offering the leadership position to Roman Reigns. He still carries that Seth Rollins Money in the Bank briefcase. And Seth Rollins walks out and he's on 2 crutches and he's got a giant brace on his right knee. And the commentary team is really putting over that this is Seth playing mind games, and he's letting Punk know, well, you're the champion now, but at some point I'll be healed. And at some point, I'm going to cash in this briefcase on you. And then Paul Heyman steps to the side and Seth Rollins turns around. And when he turns around, he starts walking, but then he lets the crutches fall by the wayside. And people instantly, I can't believe it. Then the brace comes off the knee. He starts peeling the brace off the knee, and he starts charging down to the ring, and the people are going nuts because they're really going to see it. It's really going to happen. Seth goes in there and beats the ever-loving you-know-what out of CM Punk with that briefcase. And he does it before he actually hands the briefcase to the referee, so it's not an official match, which means Seth's not going to be disqualified. And then after putting CM Punk down, even though CM Punk's already had his 30-minute match, he gets beaten down by that briefcase. Seth hands over the briefcase and waits for him. And just as CM Punk is getting to all fours, boom, stomp. Punk goes down. Seth goes for the cover. 1, 2, 3. Seth Rollins has cashed in. And Seth Rollins is your new World Heavyweight Champion. And we go to Monday Night Raw and the future with now Seth Rollins as the World Heavyweight Champion. I mean, to perfection, to a T, perfectly done. 2 for 2 when it comes to Seth Rollins cash-ins. Nobody has a perfect record like that when it comes to cash-ins. Seth Rollins now has 2 places on the Money in the Bank cash-in top 5 list, easily. And at some point now, because I also said Naomi had a pretty strong one, and she did earlier this year. But I may now have to make that list. I may now have to actually go over what the top 10 is on that list. And there are now so many questions. Was this a plan? Is this story that this was a plan the entire time? Meaning, when he offered Roman Reigns the leadership position, he knew Paul Heyman, being he, Paul knew that Roman wasn't going to take it, and it was never a serious offer to begin with. When he positioned Braun Breaker as the new leader of this group, is he positioning Braun Breaker as the new leader of this group to swerve people? And if he is Braun Breaker involved in this, or is Braun Breaker being swerved as well? Now, the three of them did appear together on the post show. So my kind of takeaway is that, yeah, this group had this plan all together, and they were lying about it. And then what's the story with the LA Knight match? Did Seth Rollins purposefully lose? And this is in character now. Did the Seth Rollins character purposefully lose a match to LA Knight and fake, so he could fake an injury, so he could move on and at the most unexpected time imaginable, cash in the Money in the Bank briefcase? And if that's the case, I don't know that there are many people that would allow themselves to lose a match for the greater good, but that could be that strategy that they'll attribute to Paul Heyman. And then what's the real life story behind it? Because even if it was like, some people believed it was a lesser injury that was being covered for by this injury spot. Some people believed it was no injury at all. The fact that he goes on Rich Eisen and works the injury. People say kayfabe is dead. I would argue this might not be, technically, I guess this is new kayfabe. New kayfabe is when you are using the audience's interpretation of what is real to play against them. Meaning the story that you're telling is being done in a way where the audience knows what an injury looks like. The audience knows what a finish looks like when it is stopped early for an injury. The audience knows all this stuff. So that's what we're going to play with. That's an example of what I call new kayfabe, and have been calling it for a long time. With this Unreal thing, I think you're going to hear a lot of people saying, you know what I've been thinking? We've been talking about this for years at this point. But I mean, he goes on Rich Eisen's show and says, we didn't get it x-rayed because it was swollen, but, I think I'm going to be out until WrestleMania. And I'm telling you, from my perspective at Saturday night's main event, I was there. And it seemed like people thought he was really injured. I don't know. I don't ask people anything like that. But it seemed that way to me anyway. So now we're in this position and so what's the story there? And then people said, insiders, if you will, said, and it seemed like this was the case, that Seth Rollins versus Roman Reigns was the planned SummerSlam match. So if it wasn't, and this was all part of the work, that's interesting. If it was, and they decided to go into a different direction, that's interesting. If there was an injury and it actually just ended up being not as big of a deal as you thought it was, and they, as always, if this storyline, if this ending to SummerSlam was a pivot, and WrestleMania 40 was a pivot, I don't think WWE should only pivot. Pivoting is clearly the best. Something magical happens when the pivot comes. Because now Seth has the 2 Money in the Bank cash-ins on the highlight reel. It's insane. And Seth Rollins is left in a position where you've now got a litany of opponents for his World Heavyweight Championship. Right in front of you, you've got CM Punk, who clearly is going to want that opportunity immediately. CM Punk, who had it robbed from him by Seth Rollins. CM Punk, who got to experience being the World Heavyweight Champion for just a moment. Wade Barrett said it best on commentary, getting to climb to the top of Mount Everest, but not being there long enough to even take a selfie. Were you ever really there? Did you ever really beat Gunther? Did you ever really have a match that is one of the best WWE matches all year? Did any of it ever really happen? Because it all happened so quickly, and Seth Rollins came and took it from you. Obviously, we have another CM Punk Seth Rollins match on the horizon, and now it's for the World Heavyweight title. Gunther is obviously going to want a match with Seth Rollins to get his World Heavyweight Championship back. And that could be very, very interesting. That could be a moment where Gunther starts to flirt with the idea of becoming a babyface himself. I think Roman Reigns, who they say the original plan was for Roman versus Seth. Roman and Jey Uso, which we can talk about at some point, were able to beat Braun Breaker and Bronson Reed. Roman Reigns and Seth are due to have an altercation. They're due to have a match. And now, with the World Heavyweight title on the line, I think that that's a title that Roman Reigns would love to have. And then you go even a step further. I think Jey Uso is on the list of people who would want a match with Seth Rollins. I think Sami Zayn is on the list after Sami Zayn beat Karrion Kross. And Sami Zayn has made it clear that he wants an opportunity at the World Heavyweight Championship. I don't see how you can argue that Sami Zayn would or wouldn't be on that list to compete for the World Heavyweight Championship. So you've already got 5 opponents right there. And by the way, what about the guy that was the last guy to beat Seth Rollins on Saturday night's main event? What about LA Knight? We have not seen much of LA Knight since Saturday night's main event. Does LA Knight kind of come out of the woodworks and say, okay, now I want a title match? That's 6 opponents that are now all World Heavyweight title matches. That now all kind of, I don't even know when you do them all. Sammy, LA Knight, Jey Uso, Roman Reigns, Gunther, CM Punk, all are going to be looking for Seth Rollins. And it's going to be so interesting to see. You know, there was always this with this group, with Seth Rollins' group. The point was always to get the World Heavyweight Championship because the World Heavyweight Championship carried with it a certain power. The World Heavyweight Championship carried with it the ability to see out the plan that Seth Rollins had. So what does that look like now? Now we're going to get to Monday Night Raw, and that is something that we're going to have to execute on. That is that we're going to have to see this group is now not a group fighting for this. This group is a group that has now achieved what their declared motivation was. You know, I think that my thought, I talked about it on this podcast, and I think the thought of a lot of people was that the tag team match with Roman and Jey would lead to a singles match with Roman and Braun Breaker, and I think eventually we will get a singles match with Roman and Braun Breaker, and that may be where we go next, but also Roman might say, well, I beat both your lackeys, now I'm going to go after Seth Rollins. Maybe. I don't really know. It's tough to say, but I've got to believe that Punk's going to be first. I've got to imagine that Clash in Paris is going to be Seth Rollins versus Punk, right? I mean, that has to be what's on the top of Seth Rollins' dance card. I don't know. We haven't put the analysis needed into this. This is a feelings podcast, and this is where we go to get all of our feelings out. I think that this is one of those scenarios where, yes, you're going to find people, and I'm sure you can read them in the podcast reviews or the YouTube comments, depending on how you intake this content. But I think the reality is that, yes, you're going to have people saying, I called this one. You're going to have people saying, I knew this was coming. And to a degree, that's literally everybody that watches the show. On some level, anybody that pays attention to what's going on in wrestling with any detail whatsoever knew that this was a possibility. But I think 2 things. Number 1, the execution of it was perfect. And number 2, once CM Punk was holding that title, I think the realization sank in of how much we actually did want to see this. And I think we had this idea that, oh, this is going to be great. We're actually going to see CM Punk. And they played that great video before he came to the ring, where they made it seem like, okay, this is maybe the direction that we're going in. Summer of Punk 2005 from the Ring of Honor days. Summer of Punk 2011 as the WWE champion. And now we get to have that 3rd Summer of Punk. Now we get another Summer of Punk. And once again, it's snatched from us. And it's so interesting because you can go back and we know now from the Unreal show that CM Punk versus Gunther was the planned main event for WrestleMania. And it just really goes to show you how much timing has to do with everything, because clearly the match and the way it finished would have been completely different at WrestleMania than it was even at SummerSlam. And here we are, worthy of an emergency podcast, I would say. I've got to believe that whatever happens between Cody Rhodes and John Cena at SummerSlam Sunday is also going to be worthy of an emergency podcast, and we will be here for it. Make sure you're subscribed. If you watch on YouTube, subscribe to the Notsam Wrestling channel. Hit like, comment on every video that we post, and watch them all. That would be very, very helpful. And of course, subscribe to the Notsam Wrestling podcast across all audio platforms, Apple, Spotify, SiriusXM app, and speaking of SiriusXM, you can listen to Notsam Wrestling live every day, Monday through Thursday, from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. We will break this and everything else that happens down on Monday. So much to keep up with. But I'm going to be here for you. Second night of an emergency podcast in a row. Let's make sure these good times keep rolling.